Hey everyone, this is Jordan from the 805 Uncensored podcast. This is a previously recorded episode. Heather and I went on a fellow leftist podcast called Let's Talk Weekly, hosted by Gray and Thomas, and we covered Maga communism, the squad endorsing Joe Biden, and a few other topics related to leftism. So I hope you enjoy it, and let us know.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Weekly. I'm Gray.
I'm Thomas.
Hold on, we need to redo that because I just covered my mic and that was bad. Okay, all right.
So
Hello,
I don't record
everyone.
live.
I know. I love pre-recording. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Weekly. I'm Gray.
I'm Thomas.
And today we have two lovely guests. They are the hosts of 805 Uncensored Podcast. And all that info is going to be in the description. So go check them out. Like, why not? Come on. So Jordan, Heather, go ahead and introduce yourself and your podcast to the audience, and then we will get on to our main discussion.
Yeah, great, Thomas. First of all, my name is Jordan. Thanks so much for having me and Heather. Heather and I run a podcast called 805 Uncensored that centers around leftist politics. We also cover music, spirituality, and a variety of topics. I started the podcast back in the summer of 2019, and we're going strong ever since.
That's awesome.
We're just thank you to have us here.
Awesome. And so today, they join us in our discussion about dissecting the leftist movement, our grievances with the movement, the toxicity, and even some of the leaders that we consider our leaders in the movement, like, for example, Bernie Sanders and AOC. So first, we're going to start off with the toxicity of the leftist movement. And I open up to y'all with this question. When you hear that toxic left, what comes to mind? And if you have had any encounters with toxic members of the left?
Right away, I think of Jimmy Dore, and I think of his kind of um, cult of fans, I would say. I think
Mhm.
of leftists that kind of just shit on other left-leaning politicians without any real substantive criticism.
Mhm.
I think of people that are just kind of so set on their ultimate ideological outcomes that they're willing to ignore any sort of temporary progress that would bring the left. And that's my take on it.
Mhm. Thomas, did you have anything to add?
I think for anyone who's online a lot, I think you get unfortunately get kind of subjected to sort of things that you probably won't see in the real world, or like you
Mhm.
won't see it like as much. And I think of things like this stupid MAGA communism that's been espoused. I think of Yeah, I think of I just think of some of the worst you see like some of the worst traits or like some of the most conservative traits trying to be applied to leftist theory,
Mhm.
and it just comes off as just like like you have no I say morals, but you have
Like, you
nothing
just want
substantive.
healthcare.
Yeah, and it comes off as very libertarian.
Mhm.
That's what it comes off as, yeah.
Yeah. Heather, any
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'm noticing that is incredibly toxic, especially online, is people on the left that if they disagree with, like Jordan said, if they disagree with you on something, it's like all of a sudden there's no room for like discussion and they just start block and they're canceling each other, which is just crazy to me. And it's not gonna be very progressive in terms of the movement if everybody continues to cancel and block each other because they disagree on one particular topic. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot more of it, in the last year or two, especially, is just they just draw an iron curtain down.
Yeah, I would, and to take something away from that point, Heather, I would also say that that directly plays into the right-wing narrative about the left, which is that we want to silence everyone, we're not open to discussion, and it's really just a terrible thing that's impacting us, unfortunately.
It's definitely not uniting. And Heather, you brought up something that like you disagree with one little, or they disagree with one little thing you say, and they call you a grifter, they call you not a real leftist. And I've had those encounters myself. That's why I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be. Like for example, I truly think the way to an actual socialist society is through social democracy. And like at least in this society, I feel like that would be the way to do it. And somehow I'm called a conservative piece of shit. I'm all of a sudden called a grifter. I'm called a fake, and I'm like, okay, well, how about we have a discussion instead of you just calling me fake?
Yeah.
But yeah, Thomas, did you want to add something? I saw you want to chime in.
Yeah, I was just going to say it goes the other direction as well. So a lot of the time, I find that people who, the ones who they just have no like moral stance, but their stance starts and stops at healthcare, and but anything, LGBTQ, anything like racism, like just like it just kind of just like the wall comes down, and there's this tendency for people to be like, oh, we should debate this, like as if like it's a debate to be had about whether people who are gay are groomers. Like you're by saying that we're going to debate that, we're already saying that that's a debatable topic, and
Yeah.
like it's not a debatable topic. You're just outright. We're talking about whether we think they're pedophiles or not, and I'm just like, no. And so there is a grift. There's a real grift, and and we got to remember, especially on social media, the algorithm loves conflict and it loves fueling the conflict, and they know this. A lot of people know this. Like Jimmy Dore knows this. Like all the people who make a lot of money out of doing this, they know it gets some views, it knows it gets some traction, and they make a lot of money out of doing it. And there is a real grift going on, particularly with obviously things falling apart politically after 2020.
Yeah. One of the things that we're already starting to talk about is Jimmy Dore, and to give some context to the audience, back in late 2020 in December, actually, there was this force the vote movement, and I was on board too. I'm like, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and now's the time to vote on Medicare for all, and we're going to see which Democrat says you don't deserve health care in a pandemic. And I was all on board with it, and then I started finding out who this motherfucker Jimmy Dore was. And he has said some very questionable stuff towards LGBTQ people, as well as just crazy like stuff when it comes to just regular like fiscally conservative crap. And this is y'all's leader.
Yeah, not to
I
mention
just
some
want to open the
yikesy.
conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's some yikesy foreign policy takes mixed in there too. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, it's literally insane, and like he had a point. Yeah, that was your one great point, and because of that, like we did see an influx of people who consider themselves leftists flock towards him. And he's not an ally. He's definitely not an
No,
ally.
no, no. Not only is he not an ally, he's the opposite of an ally. He's
Mhm.
sending people from the left that would otherwise be strong progressives over to the right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And um my issue with him was his now there are some very fair criticisms of people who we consider leaders in the on the left. For example, Bernie Sanders and AOC and the rest of the squad. And what pisses me off is that people will attack her looks, her ethnicity, the fact that she's with a white man and she's, Puerto Rican, and I'm just like, okay, those are very unfair criticisms and kind of racist and
Yeah.
sexist, I may add.
Yeah.
But we could talk about how she wore a $10,000 dress saying tax the rich at the Met Gala. We could
Mhm.
talk about that. That's a very fair criticism. We can also talk about how she voted for what's that damn thing in Israel? The Iron Dome or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
it's the Iron Dome.
Yeah, so she's voted in favor of supporting the construction of that. She doesn't even talk about Medicare for all anymore, even though that was one of her main uh, campaign tactics was Medicare for all. The Green New Deal doesn't even talk about this. So I want to also open this question to y'all: are they reliable leaders anymore?
But I think if I chime in, I think the question becomes: is electoralism like a real route to where we
Mm-hmm.
want to be headed? And I think this proves the limitations of just purely electoralism as a way to change this. Me personally, I see it more of like a harm reduction. We live in a capitalistic empire
Mm-hmm.
that is not going to allow a socialist government to come to power. Like there's so many mechanisms in place to prevent this from happening. It won't happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's we're living in a period of history, and I'm seeing it in Europe with the fascist tendencies moving further right, with countries that had some form of social welfare has been decimated because of the powers that be are trying to push it to be obliterated. All these like progresses and clawbacks that were made after the Second World War, they're all being decimated left, right, and center. And I think this is where I say, well, these are the limitations of purely just electoralism. And I don't think people can grasp that there are limits to this folly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, valid criticisms. I like any politician, like they're meant to represent you. If they don't represent you, then you look for the best alternative that there is.
Mm-hmm.
But my argument in this current system, I don't think it's going to happen electorally.
Yeah. Jordan, Heather, did you want to chime in?
Go ahead, Heather. I have some thoughts.
I do agree on the reality of the limitations that just politicians have to deal with right now. You know, we are seeing the entire like Democratic Party's infrastructure move to the right?
Mm-hmm.
And like it or not, AOC and Bernie are still in some sense a part of that. I mean, AOC is a Democrat, and so we're going to see her move to the right on some things too, or vote in ways that are kind of antithetical to what she's campaigned on in the past, or where you know the how much was the dress? $10,000 dress. My big criticism of AOC has been the after the Roe and Casey Supreme Court decision, she went out for that that little thing that they did on the White House or the Congress lawn or wherever it was, and then they got arrested, and they pretended to put their hands behind their back, and she was in pumps. She was in pumps. She was in heels. Getting arrested and then raising the arm. And I think a lot of that is becoming performative. And so I think that is a fair criticism. I think there are a lot of fair criticisms, but I also agree with the comment that, there are limitations at this point because everything is moving to the right. Given just kind of like the not just in the United States, on the entire world political stage, everything is moving to the right. And so I think we're unfortunately going to see more of these like mainstream leaders possibly moving that way as well, because they see that as the only path to retain their position, right? I mean, if you hold the line on your positions too much, you're going to get primaried.
Right.
And that's a thing that we should be discussing right now. Jordan, I'm just gonna say this real quick and then I'm gonna get to you.
Sure.
Is we have a primary system, and honestly,
Yeah.
if I was part of New York's, I think she's what, 16th district, I forget what number she's, I would be pressuring a primary movement on AOC.
Yeah.
She needs to be primaried. The primary is there for a reason.
To the left.
Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Heather and Thomas. I wanted to bring up the point of I think we're much more likely to experience a late stage fascistic dictatorship relating to late stage capitalism. I think that the general public is not nearly aware of the level of late stage capitalism that we're at. I think really this circles around to the question of reform versus revolution. How many people are we willing to have revolt at the end of the day? And I think this just frankly comes down to class solidarity. We don't have the levels of class solidarity needed to echo in a evolution in this country, and I'll just leave it at that.
Heather, go ahead and talk about that. You mentioned in our chat.
Yeah. To Jordan's point about the dictatorship, just the other night, my dad and I, my dad is 80, and he has become radicalized over the last 2 years.
Hell
yeah. Which is wild to watch.
Yeah.
For someone who used to be a Republican to then a Democrat, and now he is just completely radicalized. But
we love this.
Yeah.
We were watching C-SPAN the other night, and they had a historian. They're doing a lot of book talks right now because Congress is on vacation or whatever. And they had a historian on who was talking, and he said, he said he believed that 2024 will be the last regular election that the United States has, because we're just running straight into fascism. We're not walking into fascism, we're running into it. I would agree with that.
I would agree with that, and I would go as far as to say the 2000 election, or I would say the election before the 2000 election was our last normal one.
Yeah.
Because
I agree with you. What you're talking about with Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to also bring up was the fact that, again, these leaders not even uplifting those who would benefit the movement. For example, Marianne Williamson, she's running for president. She has an identical platform as not platform, oh my god, what's that
Policies.
word? Policies, thank you. Oh my gosh, English. Yeah, so she has similar policies as Bernie Sanders and AOC. She supports Medicare for all. She supports a Green New Deal. She supports a total economic reform. that actually uplifts the working class and not the 1%.
Hmm.
And after she announces, Bernie goes to endorse Biden,
Yeah.
who is anti all of those policies. And I know that goes back to the whole, like, this
He's
government would never allow a socialist to just come into power. But if you're in power and you have a voice, you uplift everyone. That's
Yeah.
my opinion.
he's my friend Joe, and I just defend my friend.
He's my friend.
But
Oh, go
no,
ahead,
I
Thomas.
said before about electoralism as a form, right? In this system, it's being utilized as a form of harm reduction, and I think we need to understand that. The reason why I know the reason why Bernie doesn't do this is because he's a co-chair in the Senate. All these things were given to him and can be taken away, and I think that's the level of, they don't have, the fork is prodded into his back, and I think again he's looking at a form of harm reduction, and that's the problem. The left has been so defound in terms of actual electoral power, and then on the ground power too, that we're kind of having to
Mhm.
keep placating, and that's why again it's not just the United States, but things just keep shifting rightwards because we're in this constant state of um, harm reduction.
Yeah,
The
and what
return.
another thing is, we don't have a leftist party. The Democrats
Right.
are not leftist, guys. We don't have, we're not organized under one party, and even if we wanted to vote for some people who run on the Green Party, we can't even really vote for them because they can't participate in a primary, or they're not even on the ballot. So yeah, our electoral system is probably our biggest disadvantage towards the leftist movement and actually getting the right people into power.
Yeah, I've long felt, from an anarchist perspective, that our issues are far beyond anything that the state apparatus could legitimately address.
Mhm. And
Not in the system either. With capitalism in decay, and that's what we're seeing right now. It's completely at the end of its. It's
Yeah.
going to get. I feel like it's going to get a lot worse, and people don't realize it's going to get so much worse. But this need for constant growth and constant profit, and like there's only so much you can pound out of people before, like where does it come from? Where does it keep coming from?
Hmm.
And it's gonna destroy society in the long term.
but like,
I
that's the
mean,
thing. Like, what? Oh, I'm so sorry, Heather. I was
oh
just gonna
no.
ask, like, what do we do? Like, if
Yeah.
if if people don't see what's going on, how do we make them see?
I mean,
I
I think that people ultimately do see at a point when it starts to personally affect them. And here in the United States, I think we are about to see a number of people wake up when their student loan interest begins to accrue in
Hmm.
I think 2 months here. Because to Thomas's point, uh how much can you squeeze out of people, right? There comes a point where the money's not there, okay.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I think my own opinion is that we are going to see that with student loans, because as many as 60% in some polls of people with student loans going into repayment are saying there is no way in hell that they can even resume payments, because the cost of living and their pay scale now is not what it was before the pandemic. And so I think that even when their interest starts to accrue, which is an abomination that that's going to happen, even if they're going to continue to make that whatever policy he's doing with a 12-month forgiveness period of not making payments or whatever, we're going to see a lot. I think that we're going to see a lot more people waking up because it starts to hit them personally.
Yeah.
I have found that a lot of people have to be affected by things personally before they can get it for whatever reason. And that is a lot of people, at least in America.
But, and to add to that point, historically, you look at the trends of like when this occurs, two things happen, and it's either people go in a direction of they go in a direction of complete unrest, but you get back to the whole conversation about the toxic left and how people try and like push people into a direction that and makes them end up fighting the wrong people.
Yeah.
And that's
right.
they want people to say like it's these people that are causing all the problems. And that's why we are where we are as a country right now. I think of Maga communism. I think of patriotic leftism. That's just nationalist socialist by another name.
Yeah, I was gonna say it just sounds like Nazism.
But, it's just like you get these like bad. Unfortunately, I see it right now. Actually, France is a very good example of this. Just going completely down the route of like fascist dictatorship, basically overriding the parliament to raise the retirement age. Basically, right
don't fuck with the French.
But it's a prime example of what happens when a libertarian president or someone who is a liberal. When I talk about when you scratch a liberal, you bleed a fascist, and eventually the push comes to shove, they will like you said, Jordan. You go down that route of when push comes to shove, they will fall down into fascist tendencies because they don't see any other direction for themselves to remain in or keep society.
Yeah.
I want that on a t-shirt. I want that on a poster. When you scratch a liberal, you bleed a fascist. That is perfect.
It is perfect. I like that.
You know what? That's going to be the slogan for this show.
But we could
go ahead, Heather.
Sorry. I was going to say we could never do what they do in France here ever. We don't have the infrastructure from a support network or mutual aid network for people to take the time to go do that. But also Jordan and I were just talking about this yesterday. Our police are heavily militarized now. Like where Jordan and I live, they're having a community meeting next week to introduce the city and its constituents to all of the military equipment that you'll see the police using now. We're looking at little robots roaming around the streets. We're looking at armored tanks. And what was the other one on that image, Jordan? A drones flying around.
Yeah, they had like helicopters and shit. They had
just what?
Oh hell no.
And so that's why we could never do that,
because and
people won't do it.
Well, because not only that, like American culture, we're just lazy.
Yeah,
we're also just lazy. Let's be real here. Like, yeah, the police is a definitely big one. But we're just lazy. We'll be like, yeah, that sounds like a good time. I'm not gonna go. That's how we are, folks. Like, and another thing is like,
no, but like seriously, Gray, though, sorry to interrupt you, but
go for it.
You can't see from like the American mindset, like, oh my god, I can't wait to see all of our fancy tools that we have and all the fucking shit that we have to blow people up.
Right? And it's like I want to join our French homies and like go ahead and, riot in the streets. We'd get
Well,
killed.
Yeah.
Go
the
ahead,
reason
Thomas.
why I bring up the French stuff is because you're seeing it in real time. Like I said,
Yeah.
how when unrest happens, right, there are bad characters that come out of the woodwork, and they will divert people in a direction that is not truly at where the problem lies. And so
Yeah.
right now
Mhm.
you have a police officer just shot a black person in their car. It just happens to be from Middle Eastern descent. They're not, and the French, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in France who are hardcore. Unfortunately, have a lot of racism, right? And you
Mhm.
have people like Marine Le Pen, who is a fascist, who's running against Macron and is basically espousing all of France's problems on immigration. And this is where now we have an unrest involving a police officer who shot someone who's black. The police officer raised $1 million
Yeah.
from people from the general public
Yeah.
because they sympathize with the police officer. And
Mhm.
the problem is because we have bad characters who are leading people into a direction of saying these are the ills of society. This is the problem of society. This is why your life is turning terrible. Not
Mm-hmm.
because of things like rolling out retirement age. Not because of
Mhm.
things like minimum wage stagnation has caused you to earn less over the last 40 years. Not because of like your social services and your social safety net's been ripped from you.
Mhm.
That's why I bring up the French stuff because, like, we applaud France for doing all these things, but deep within that unrest is people who are trying their utmost to divert that energy into something that is truly horrific.
Yeah.
Um, and are truly terrible people will divert that energy into some of the worst aspects of society.
Yeah, something that I was just thinking about, Heather, do you remember the news that came out recently about these corporate CEOs getting caught in meetings bragging about like price gouging people, like how
Yeah.
far they could go and getting away with it?
Yeah.
I think in any other country, almost any other country, just that news alone would trigger people to riot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very sad too, because we not only our media is like made for the public to just distrust it, like that's how they do it here. But we're also just so desensitized to we're just like, oh, okay. Like when the whole like fucking submarine bullshit happened, I'm like, oh, ha ha ha, another billionaire is being stupid. Cool. In any other country, I bet they were pissed.
Yeah,
And yeah, you're totally right on that. Like it just, and again, it goes back to American culture. We're just lazy.
But I think also, to a lot of people's credit, we're also so, I mean, there are so many people working 2 and 3 jobs. Who the fuck has time to be upset? Time or energy? I mean,
hmm
I can't entirely blame a lot of people who,
Mm-hmm.
are working a full-time job during the day and then are door dashing all night long just to pay rent, or again back to that student loan thing. I mean,
You know
and
right.
I
what?
think
That's
and I think that's
true.
and I think that's kind of the point, right? Make
Mm-hmm.
Americans so overworked and tired that they literally don't have the bandwidth to care about some of these things. Like
Yeah.
they have to be lazy because laziness is almost like self-preservation.
Right.
Um that's just
Yeah, I'm gonna take away that laziness comment, and I
no,
agree. We're just too tired.
no, I think that laziness is what it is though, Gray. I just think that there's a reason for it, like that we don't,
Mm-hmm.
like a deeper reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And well,
Which is
also,
exhaustion.
we just don't, we've talked about this a bunch of times too on the show, Heather. We don't have the mutual aid networks
Hmm.
that are necessary.
Well, yeah, because American culture is literally based on individualism.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Like, how much money can I make? How much
Hyper
money?
individualism.
Yeah. Go ahead, Thomas. Go ahead and close this off because we only have a couple minutes left.
I was really going to say, think about the mantra of the American dream. The American dream was to own a white picket fence with your own front lawn, you have your own little house. And, that still didn't solve the issue of there would always be an underclass in that dream. Like the dream was you just got out of that underclass. But now we're seeing even that is being stripped away from
Mm-hmm.
the majority.
Yeah, the
And
middle class doesn't exist.
I think America's in this weird stage where there's still a large amount of people who are extremely comfortable in this system. And it's why you see the deranged takes of like calling for peace anytime like there's a lynching or anytime there's an officer overstepping his boundaries and killing people. Anytime there's private property damage, like you see there's such
Mm-hmm.
deranged like just stay peaceful, like don't react to it. And it's just the real calls for all they value above all else
Mm-hmm.
is their own peace and safety. And
Yeah.
even though they themselves aren't feeling, or there's nothing that's eliciting onto their lives that is causing what others are feeling right now in this system. And yeah, it's just there needs to be um, people need to get out of the mindset like private private property. Like, who cares about private property? Like
Mm-hmm.
lives and property always. And I think people just have this desire and clamor for peace when peace isn't warranted.